And speaking of books, I'm bringing up another powerful author. I just like to call her Dr. Mo. Come on, Dr. Mo. Come on up. Welcome. Welcome, Dr. Mo.
Okay, sweet. Good morning, Austin, Texas. Oh my God, it's good to be home. Thank you all for getting up and coming out early this morning. Let me make something mess up. I am Dr. Mo Anderson, DrMoeAnderson.com. Connect with me, follow me, and please check out my books. I'm getting a commercial out there early, but
All right, good time.
I am a native Texan. I am an author, speaker, podcast host, and doctor of dental surgery. So the Dr. Mo is a real title. My profession is dentistry, but my love, my heart is writing and speaking, anything to do with words. The fact that people all over the world can take the 23 letters of the alphabet from the Phoenicians and write 50,000, 100,000 word books, and they're different and they're unique and they're different voice, even though there are really only 3 stories to tell: man versus man, man versus nature, man versus himself. It's just fascinating to me. And I was born a writer. I became a dentist later, but writing is like Big Mama. She was just there, Writing was just there for me. So I have written 8 books. 2 I wrote while I was living in Austin from 2008 until 2016. But I moved back. Those were the Obama years. It was nice. But I moved back to Dallas-Fort Worth to be near my 3 grandchildren in 2016. And I come back and forth as much as possible. So coming back post-COVID to this wonderful event. Ross, thank you. Let's give her another hand for 16 years of this. Really, Sue, I appreciate you, my fellow authors, and my dear friend here, Ann Boyd. And I don't want to get the hook and the little buzzer going out, so I'm going to get through my other stuff fast, because y'all can tell I talk slow. I could be up here all day. I could say my name for 8 minutes. But I have brought 4 books with me today. 2 of my novels are a series: Never Close Your Heart and When a Sister's Fed Up. When a Sister's Fed Up is about the mayor of a small Texas town, approximately fictional town where Plano would be. She is very successful. She has 2 young children, and she has a husband who was a big-time realtor. The market crashed, and now he feels like he's in her shadow. And in their relationship, the other woman is the church. And so it's a little bit PG-17, so it is categorized as Christian fiction. It sells as Christian fiction. It's not graphic, but these are real Christians who have real lives and real problems. And in this book, she had a daughter. I mentioned she had 2 children, and the daughter was a hot mess. And even though I wrote 2 books in between, nonfiction and another book, people kept asking, what happened to Sloan? What happened to Sloan? So finally, 2 years ago, I picked up the story in Never Close Your Heart, and I'm going to read a short excerpt from that. They are at church, the Henry family, and Sloan is now married with her own child. And Sloan, I've already told you, is a mess, so be prepared. Pastor Carson rose from his throne-like chair on the pulpit. His shadow looked like a fingertip on the giant screen behind him, where the sermon's video transitioned from a large wooden cross on Calvary to a Madonna-like scene of a church mother and her child. Sloan felt a little bit of bile in her throat. How long is this god-awful Mother's Day program going to be? She couldn't recall the specifics, but she knew God did a bunch of stuff in one day. He was efficient. He made clouds, animals, fish, ski lodges on a Tuesday morning, and Reverend Carson was going into the 2nd hour of talking about nothing. She used the selfie mode on her phone to apply lipstick. Then she liked a few posts on Twitter and played a game of Candy Crush. She glared at her husband sitting on her left, beaming as if he was somebody's mama. She closed her eyes, bowed her head, and audibly repeated her standard prayer. Why, God, why? In the name of Jesus, Timothy, Phineas, and 10 other white men, why? Her fervent but ineffectual prayer was interrupted by a light tap on her right shoulder. "You okay, Mama?" Ever, her son, scooted over until their thighs were touching. He moved his small hand from her shoulders to her forearm. She opened her eyes and turned to her son. He seemed worried. He was perpetually anxious since she got arrested. When she was home, he was forever lurking nearby. She reminded herself to be more patient. Feeling guilty, Sloan took his hand and squeezed it in a gesture of reassurance. "I'm fine, darling. Thank you for asking. I'm going to pray that you don't go to jail," he whispered and bowed his head. A spotlight circling the room shone on his angelic face as usual. Sloan was pleasantly surprised by how well he turned out in the looks department. He was 75% a replica of her with the appropriate masculine touches. The remainder of his appearance stemmed from his relatively unattractive father, a man who looked like he had a boxing match with the wind and lost every round. What possessed her to marry her father's friend, she mused, and not for the first time. The slideshow stopped and the pastor droned on about motherhood, marrying a woman's highest calling, blah, blah, blah. "Mom, can I play games on your phone?" Ever whispered. "No, pay attention," Scott said before Sloan could reply. Ignoring him, Sloan opened her TikTok app and put her phone on her lap where Ever could see it. He giggled. At that moment, Pastor Carson told the congregation, "Ladies, the easiest way to sustain a Christ-like demeanor for motherhood is having a strong, loving, Christ-loving head of household to cover and guide you." Sloan was mentally disagreeing with the Reverend when Scott grabbed her phone, her husband. "What the hell?" Her mouth was agape as she watched him put her most loved possession in his suit pocket. "Oh, now you want to be assertive." She decided to let that go and crossed her legs. In that moment, she didn't care that her ankle monitor was exposed beneath the hem of her pants. She wished she was sitting with her father. She leaned to one side and spied him in the front row with the army of deacons dressed in their Sunday best. She moved right for a clearer view, but couldn't be sure who the guy was sitting next to him. It looked like her brother, but he hadn't been to church in 6 years. She was pondering the mystery visitor when she noticed her husband grip the pew in front of her and stand. She reached for her purse on the floor, assuming it was time for the benediction. Ever whispered, "He's standing for prayer. Pastor Carson said anyone fighting against principalities and strongholds in their homes should stand up." Sloan's hair whipped like Taylor Swift spying Kanye West backstage during an award show. "Wait, what?" "Sisters and brothers of the church, if someone near you is standing, that means they have a burden we must help them bear. I want two or three of you to go to that member of the family of Christ and pray for them." To Sloan's horror, a dozen cross bearers began to move toward Scott with outstretched hands. A zombie apocalypse. Didn't the man say 2 or 3? Really? Everybody needs to pray for my husband? At that moment, a woman pushed her way past Ever to get closer to Scott. She looked at Sloan as if she expected her to stand and pray for Scott. Sloan waved her program like she was having a hot flash because she was. "He is determined to embarrass me. Now, everybody in the dang church knows we are having problems and they assume I'm the reason." One of the brothers, touching Scott, started praying loudly, and the woman who was practically in Ever's lap said, "Sister Lee, do you need a prayer also? I'll pray for you." She put her hand on Sloan's hand. Sloan swatted her hand away and stood. She looked at Scott and rolled her eyes. What man in a $1,000 suit needs prayer? Why is he taking prayers away from poor people with real problems? Ooh, she hated him so much right now. Please stop by and visit my table. Thank you for your presence and for supporting us.
So Dr. Mo, comedian as well. I love it, the wit, and I love also how you stated that you knew even at an early age you were writing before you became a dentist. Of course, something before we grow up, so to speak. But in that writing, you got something going on there. So thank you for sharing your work with us. And you said you have a podcast?
I have a podcast, I do.
Okay, we'll talk about that more later. Is John Harris in the house?
Yes.
Come through, John Harris. Welcome, John Harris, to the stage, our next author.
Good morning to everybody today. First of all, I want to thank Dr. Oliphant for giving me this opportunity. I really appreciate it. Just listening to all the authors, kind of honored to be in everyone's presence. The intelligence, the brilliance that has already been displayed. We have a lot of talent out there. My name is John Harris, longtime journalist, co-author of my first book, From Gold Teeth to Gold Jacket. It's the story of Pro Football Hall of Famer Edgerrin James. Edgerrin played for the Indianapolis Colts, Arizona Cardinals, and the Seattle Seahawks. He went to the Hall of Fame in 2020. I recommend everyone to go watch his Hall of Fame speech on YouTube. It's considered one of the greatest Hall of Fame speeches of all time. He talks about his life, his family, the fact that he's the first player in the Hall of Fame whose Hall of Fame bus has dreadlocks, which I thought was kind of interesting. Speaking to his personality, who he was. The title of the book, From Gold Teeth to Gold Jacket, describes him as a young man who was known for wearing his gold grill out of South Florida, and the gold jacket signifies his gold jacket from the Hall of Fame. He came up with the title, Typical Edgerrin. Who's this book for? It's a football book, but it's really just tells you about the person inside of the helmet. He used football as a platform to become an entrepreneur, which is what he is now. He signed the biggest contract for a rookie when he came out ever. Made more money his first year in the NFL than any player had ever made in 1999. And he pretty much did it on his own. Grew up, no dad. And I want to read you some excerpts about him and who he is. And I think these excerpts will tell you a little bit more about him, the person he is, and how he came to be one of the greatest running backs of all time. The book is written in his voice, but I wrote the introduction, which will kind of describe a little bit about who he is and what he's about. The night before the UCLA game, the most important game of his life, University of Miami running back Edgerrin James sands a crystal ball, boldly and correctly predicted his future. It was a heartfelt, business-driven prognosis based on years of not only enduring, but overcoming the slings and arrows of living a hard-knock life circa 1998. With the NFL draft only a few months away, James set his sights squarely on securing a bag of cold hard cash that would forever lift his family out of poverty and guarantee generational wealth. I just needed to get the money one time, he said. I get the money one time and I'm not worried about it anymore. I'm not worried about the money because I can live without doing all the things that a lot of people try to do with money. I never cared about money as far as I've got to use it. I just wanted money for the safety and to be able to provide for my family. This book is about James's rise to prominence as a football phenom from the Deep South who didn't permit himself to be shackled by life circumstances and evolved into a college legend on his way to becoming an NFL superstar, culminating in the rarefied air of the Pro Football Hall of Fame. From Gold Teeth to Gold Jacket reveals that James, despite his humble beginnings, was ahead of the curve financially among his NFL peers, prompting legendary sports agent Lee Steinberg to marvel about his steel-trap mind. An early example of James' astute financial acumen emerged when he chose not to hire representation until after he was drafted. There were two sides to Edrin, said Steinberg, who along with eventual Major League Baseball team owner Jeff Morad negotiated James's first deal. There was the superficial Edrin, who had dreadlocks and interesting teeth that would tend to give people a perception about who he was. The real Edrin was extremely bright and incredibly organized in how he went about things. One thing about Edrin that is interesting, he became the man of the house at a young age, grew up without his dad, one of 5 brothers, raised by a single mom. I mean, we've heard the story a lot. Somehow he survived it. Somehow he made it, he overcame it. He used the negatives and turned them into positives. One of the ways he was able to do it is he hauled watermelons with his uncles in Georgia. And he was paid, he would make about $200 a day. And he'd get paid by the truck. 2 people worked on the truck. If you did 10 trucks a day, you made $100. And then I figured, why not do the whole truck by myself? That was $200 a day. Hauling watermelons gave you grown man strength. Grown man strength was a different kind of strength. You're not lifting weights, but nobody's going to push you around. You're throwing those watermelons. You're using your legs, your back, and your arms. When I was 13, my mama pulled me aside and told me I was man of the house. I was in middle school. I was the 3rd oldest brother. Mama made it real clear that I was the one who would handle that responsibility, even at that young age. I promised to take care of her forever and promised to do whatever it takes. I took that role in that position very, very seriously because I was the one she trusted to step up. In the last excerpt I want to read, Edrin is the father. He has 6 children. He is the ultimate Mr. Mom. 4 of his children have attended HBCUs. One just graduated from law school in Howard. Another is studying to be a plastic surgeon. He has 2 sons who are like among the best in the country as athletes. He takes his role as a father very seriously. The mother of his children, 4 of his children, passed away from leukemia in 2009. That was when he decided to retire. He felt like it was my time to be a dad. My last excerpt. When you have kids, it's about holding yourself accountable, holding others accountable. For me, the joy comes from the fact that I'm able to position them to be successful. My oldest daughter stayed on campus 4 years. She did exactly what we set out to do, to give them a fair shot at doing everything in this world. That's the beauty of it. You hold your kids accountable. You have to live up to it. You can't be one of those guys that says things got tough. You've got to be willing to do whatever it takes for your kids. I don't want my sons to learn anything from another kid or another man. I don't need them to look to somebody else. They've got a real daddy. I try to beat them to the punch to make them say, if my daddy said it, you better believe it's true. I try to do that with all my kids. I've got 3 daughters. The day your cycle comes, I don't want to hear it from nobody else. You come right to me. I know that's an uncomfortable situation, but I want you to know I'm right here. As soon as that happens, I'm going to give you my speech. You're growing into adulthood and becoming a woman. You're not a little girl anymore. They're going to make a better decision at 16 than they would at 14. And they're going to make a better decision at 18 than they would at 16. All I wanted to be able to do was say, you're an adult now. Make good decisions. I'm a real father. I make it real clear. Sometimes you have to talk tough, sometimes you have to act tough, but this is the world we live in. I think all men have empathy. We're all gangsters, and we're all cutthroat until it's your daughter, until it's your aunt, until it's your mama. The title of the book is From Gold Teeth to Gold Jacket. Her name is John Harris. Please come by, stop by, buy a book, say hi, pick up a card. Thank you.
And that's the reality, to have those conversations, even if they're uncomfortable, to have someone to be there, to talk with you about the real deal. So thank you. And our next author, Charlize Lyles. Let's welcome Ms. Lyles to the stage, please. Charlize Lyles, welcome.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Thank you so much for making this happen. We drove down from Plano, Texas, that's just north of Dallas, to be here because some friends told us about this several years ago, and I wanted to be a part of it. I'm here today to share my memoir, Do I Dare Disturb the Universe? From the projects to prep school. This is a story, my story is based on a lot of opportunities that came to African Americans flowing from the blood of Martin Luther King and so many others who fought hard during the civil rights movement. And one of those opportunities was called A Better Chance. And basically it plucked really poor kids like me out of the hood, out of housing projects, and placed us in private preparatory schools. And this is probably one of the toughest decisions my mom ever made in her life, was for me, her middle child of 5.